ahead and I guess plunge into our the next big section, which is all the housing inventory stuff. Personally, I think this is one of the neater features of the system. We really, hopefully, some of you, most of you, saw in our supplemental training, developed a really interactive system with our housing inventory to check people in and out of individual beds. To do that, we also had to create a fully functioning housing inventory that needed to be created and maintained on an individual basis as well. And hopefully we created a pretty simplified interface. It might take a little while to get used to. But it was developed to mirror how inventory is handled in the real world. We kind of tried to did something that, incorporated all the data standards that HUD needed, plus looked at all the reporting features of AHAR and HIC and everything like that, but also the needs of how inventory really works in the new world, the real world. Now, each inventory item can be created and configured as well as tracked on an individual basis, providing a lot more flexibility, usability, and time saving that allows users and organizations with real-time physical inventory usage information. Housing inventory is set up and defined on a per residential program and site basis. So it's kind of a per residential program, per site link. Now, while most programs in the system have a single site, programs administered at one site location, for those residential programs that are administered at multiple sites, they will have multiple sets of inventory configured, and users will need to ensure that they put clients into the proper program site combination, kind of how I talked about before with if you have multiple sites, for scattered sites. You need to make sure that you interact with the proper set of inventory when the client is enrolled. Depending on which program site the client's enrolled in, that's what set of inventory those clients are actually going to interact with. And it also provides a lot of flexibility that, if you have a scattered site with apartments all over the place, you kind of have the ability to do, if you want to just track it at one site with all your apartments there, that's great. You can split it up. You can have 3 or 4 sites, to track, these groups of apartments or these groups of shelters or housing. Gives you a lot of flexibility to how you want to break it up, because ultimately everything is kind of grouped and pulled together on the program level. Just those sites kind of give you the ability to track things and do everything individually. Now, only residential programs can maintain housing inventory in the system. It includes the following types: any program with the type of emergency shelter, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, permanent housing, or safe haven, as well as a couple VA-funded programs also support inventory of VASH, as well as the VA GPD, which is Grant Per Diem, which is a kind of transitional housing program. Now, please note, as you create, you have to create programs and sites. Inventory isn't something that you have to, hey, where do I create it at? The system automatically takes care of that for you. So as soon as you create a new program and it's residential and you add a site to it, once you save that, the system's automatically going to create you an inventory record. Same thing, we're working on some processes that if you remove the site, add a new site, it's basically very dynamic to what inventory you have. And that's also another reason we have some validation there. That's why you can't just switch the program type or change the agency. Same thing on the site. You can't just remove a site that has enrollments or inventory because we don't want you to accidentally lose any of that data.
I'm going to cut in here and answer a question that I think is pertinent for everyone to hear while Brian's just getting started on the inventory stuff. We had a question about inventory and whether or not you would be required to do this in HMIS. The answer is a little complicated at the moment. Currently, ECD and HMIS staff, basically me and my guys, will not be requiring this from you. We won't be harassing you about getting your inventory set up because it's something we are going to require. However, because of the new statutory requirements for continuums of care, you will likely be mandated to keep your inventory up to date by the COC. So that's more of a COC thing, and it's something that because DCD is the lead for many of your COCs, that we might end up enforcing on behalf of the COCs. But I know some of you already use other software to manage your inventory. This is an opportunity for you to use something that for free, that you won't have to pay for. But also something to keep in mind is the inventory that you set up in HMIS is meant to be used in a collaborative nature. Not only will your agency be able to see what beds you have, but your entire COC will be able to. And so there is a vested interest at the COC level for all agencies to have all of their inventory in, so that to make better use of the whole scope of offering, so to speak.
All right, thanks, Dan. Kind of continue with a little bit of background. Each housing inventory record, kind of shown above, kind of has the status, inventory name, program, and site it's associated to it. And there's a few places in the system that you can find this. Only inventories with a status of active, as you can see there's a couple there, are fully configured and able to use to track client stays. Basically, active means you have at least one bed that's fully configured, or one unit or one item that's fully configured within your inventory. Now, you can only put that, people into that single bed, but that's the minimum requirement. Now, there are some other statuses, such as no inventory, which basically means it's blank, nothing exists, as well as unconfigured, which basically means it has inventory created, but it doesn't meet standards. It's missing a date, so it doesn't have all the data elements filled out for actually any of the beds. Now, those with no inventory or unconfigured still need setup performed. We basically have a couple different setup screens of what we call full entry, as well as an edit confirmation screens that we hope everybody takes a liking to, because we think we made pretty decent interface to entering and tracking this information. Now, the inventory can be found in two places. One place, the main place, is on your start page, but anytime you click on those links, that's more for all agency users. It's going to take you directly to the review screen, not actually links to the configuration stuff. You'll have links in there. We do recommend that if you're setting up inventory for the first time, to actually go through the site profile that we showed you earlier. The reason for that is, depending on the status of it, whether it's active, unconfigured, or no inventory, the system is smart enough to actually put you on the specific utility that is probably the best starting point. Then you can go on through the process. Now, one note that if you do have a program labeled as other, I know we have some others within the system because you weren't sure which one you wanted to do. Other, program types of other do not have inventory. So if you do want to have inventory with the system, you'll need to make sure that you do change your program type to one of the available ones. That way the system will go ahead and open up inventory for you. Choose the best one that describes what your program is. Okay, now we're going to start with what we call, like I said, there's two utility screens that basically, depending on your need, provide different abilities to create and or configure inventory. Now, those inventories that basically have the status of no inventory, there's nothing created, this is going to be your starting point when you select it through the site profile. And basically, this screen is used to add. It's only an add utility. You can't change things or configure things. It's basically when you're adding either brand new, right off the bat to, start your inventory off the bat, or if you have existing inventory and you need to add a large batch, say, hey, I've got 10 more beds or 20 more vouchers. This is probably the place that you want to do that at. Within the system, there's basically three specific bed types or inventory types that we allow to be configured and tracked, and that's basically beds, units, and vouchers. So they're basically, each one has a little bit different variety, and we'll kind of explain a little bit about which one you should use. And each of them, of course, contain different configurations depending on which type you choose. Now, all of them are available on the screen at the same time. You don't have to fill out all of them. You can choose just to do beds or just to do vouchers, or do beds and units. It's very flexible in what you want to do here. But, however, if you do start one, you do need to finish the configuration of each one. And we'll kind of take you down the configuration or creation path of each one so you know what you're looking at. With the setup, kind of which one should you choose, I guess, in the real world. Kind of each one was created with a specific real-world kind of scenario or environment in mind. With beds, these inventory items should be used when you have a large number of beds in a single area, such as like a dormitory, a barrack, large open area. It's best applied to, it was basically created for shelter-type situations. Maybe you also are transitional housing and you have 5 or 6 beds in an open area for short-term housing options. That's what it should be created for. Now, beds do consist of 2 types. Basically, there's facility type and non-facility type beds, and the non-facility type are basically also referred to as the other, you know, like on Hicks and everything. Facility beds are those that are located directly within your homeless residential site, and they're specifically for homeless persons. Now, the non-facility, or what we call other, are usually located off your facility, non-facility, and their primary purpose is usually not homeless persons, but it's almost like an overflow situation. So, you know, you have some people, and you know, a church down the street has 4 cots or beds in an open area. Those are, and you use them during certain scenarios. That's when you want to actually configure the non-facility beds. Now, units, these inventory items should be used when there's a small amount of beds in a single enclosed living area. Units actually are more, we'll probably say this a lot during the training, they're containers for beds. And they basically can consist of things like apartments, SROs, townhouses. They're best applied to things like transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, permanent housing places where lengths of stay are medium or long term, where you put families or maybe single apartments for special need clients. Because when you create units, you're creating the container plus you're creating the individual beds within a unit. You're not just assigning people, here's 4 people in a unit. You actually need to put them in the unit plus the individual beds. Vouchers, these inventory items are beds not located within your homeless facility. They're almost like virtual inventory for things like hotel and motel vouchers, you know, for shelters that are made through various forms of payment. Now, also, voucher items may be eventually used for collection of information from, like, housing authorities for Section 8 or public housing vouchers. Not currently in the system, but that's another area where hopefully, you know, the collaborative process will bring everybody in, and that's where it can be used as well. Now, one of the main differences between units and vouchers, you know, a lot of people might have some questions, well, when do I use units? When do I use vouchers? You know, the main idea of units is to be used for, you know, a physical housing residence, usually on your premises, something, you know, scattered site, what you have there. While vouchers are, like I said, more of a virtual providing payment to be housed at another entity, basically. Now we're going to go through each individual setup of each one. Like I said, they can be configured individually, or you can go across the screen, you know, if you have 2 or more, and kind of go down the row. It allows a lot of flexibility of what you need to, what order you can go in. One thing is, once you do start one, needs to be completely finished before the items will be created. Each one of those start with kind of a basic question set. It's almost like a starting point, and then you kind of work your way backwards of configuring those items. The full entry screen basically collects like things like the number of items you have, beds, as well as we try to collect, you know, the household type. You know, we kind of slot them in. You know, what kind of beds? Are they adults, adults and children, to meet the data standards from HUD. Now, with the bed setup, basically the first thing it asks for is just number of beds. Basically, it's the number of physical beds that you have at your specific, you know, that is associated to the specific program. Once you enter that, basically what it does is it kind of opens up the screens. You know, as you hit next, it basically will then kind of build upon the answers that you have, and it always validates backwards. So you enter in 30 here, and you hit next with beds. Then what it does is it opens up a second question, and this is where it splits it out between facility beds and non-facility beds. Now, if all 30 are in one allotment or another, you basically just enter it in the area and hit next. Now, the one rule here is the amount that you put in these two boxes, of course, have to add up to the total amount of beds. Once you're done there, you hit next. And basically, the next screen basically takes those two entries that you enter here and basically gives a grid for beds. And it's basically broken up into facility and non-facility, depending on what you enter. And it's basically kind of like almost like a cross-sectional grid where it'll have all the household types here, you know, adults and children, adults only and children only, and then it's broken up by beds also allow for availability, basically whether they're year-round, seasonal, or overflow. And you basically enter in what beds you have depending on those two configurations. Now, one note about the seasonal and overflow, as we kind of mentioned in the supplemental training, seasonal and overflow beds are only available for emergency shelters. So if you're not an emergency shelter and you want to create some beds, basically these two are locked out. You'll only have to worry about filling out your beds in the year-round availability section there. And just a quick note, you know, availability, basically anything that's year-round, it's basically on the premises, always available. Seasonal are ones that are available at certain predefined times, usually a lot of like cold weather months, where it needs to have both a start and an end date, basically a specific time range. And then overflow beds are things that aren't specifically you know, it's not there all the time, but it may be something that can be pulled out at times of higher than expected demand, maybe a couple cots down in the basement, that sort of thing. Now, once you enter in the information here, you do need to make sure that the total number here that you enter does equal each subset. So in this example, if you had 20 facility beds, you basically, the total number that you enter here, of course, needs to be 20 as well. Since you have 10 non-facility beds in the grid directly below it, the total number entered would have to equal 10. Like I said before, it kind of builds upon, kind of starts at a big number and kind of works its way down, but the system's always validating back up to make sure that you get this total of 30. Now, with units, units are kind of, I guess, the most in-depth ones because they involve kind of a two-step process. You know, there's both the units plus the beds in the units, since the units are just containers. The initial question the system will ask is basically number of units plus the total of beds that you have in those units. So it kind of gets a baseline information for you. Once you hit next, then the system basically asks for what we call a number of bed per unit distribution. And that basically asks, you know, we basically provide two methods of how do you want to split those beds throughout those units. There's basically system and manual. Now, system, what it does is it basically kind of takes its best guess. Now, that one probably is best to be used when your beds are perfectly evenly divisible by your units. Like in this case, 20 beds, 4 units, it's divisible. The system will automatically know, oh, you put 4 beds in each unit. But however, if it isn't evenly divisible, it still will be able to be used, and we'll kind of explain that during that section. Now, manual basically will provide you with an area to configure every bed in that unit specifically. Now, here with system, basically what it asks, and it kind of provides a little bit of directional information to provide what we're looking for. And since the system is automatically going to distribute the beds between your units automatically, it's asking for what is the overall unit's household type. So the system is asking for a unit number. So, of course, the amount that you put in within these boxes here have to equal the amount of units. And wherever you put the unit, whatever household type, adults and children, you know, adults only or children only, every bed that is placed within that unit will also take on that household type. Now, don't worry, within this full entry screen. This is kind of just a way to collect a bunch of information up front. So if you set a unit to adults and children, and then, you know, later on you find out, oh, I messed up, it should have been a different household type, during the next screen, which is basically the next step's the edit configuration screen, the system, like I said, it basically breaks up every single bed unit individually. You'll be able to change that later. Another thing we want to talk about is what we call CH unit, and that's what we call chronically homeless units. Per HUD data standards, permanent supportive housing programs, and this is only available for those. It's not a permanent supportive housing program. Basically, the system will gray these fields out. You won't be able to enter. Requires any units and beds within the units to be identified as chronically homeless, which basically means the people that you're expecting to have residents in those beds have special needs. Once you've done that step, basically you hit save and you move on to the next one. But we're going to show you quickly, say you selected manual, provides you, takes a little bit more work from the configuration side, but it does provide a lot more flexibility on what you're looking for. And depending on the number of units that you have defined, it'll actually list them all here individually. I mean, even if you put in 25 units, it'll basically scroll down the whole screen, giving you the ability to actually manually allot your beds. This is probably a good situation. Now, if you have tons of units and it's evenly distributable, you know, 20 units with 80 beds, kind of recommend using system because it'll put 4 in each one. But if you do have situations where you have odd units where you have, oh, okay, these 2 have 4 beds, these 3 have 1 bed, these 4 have 2 beds, this is probably the way you want to go. Now, you'll be able to fix it on the next screen, but entering it in manually might be the best option. Now, here, what it's looking for, it's not looking for units, because each unit is specifically labeled. You're actually putting the number of beds in those units. So as you can see here, Unit 1, I'm putting 5 beds. Unit 2, 5 beds. Unit 3, 4 beds, et cetera, of course, under the specific household types. Now, you can even split up the number of, you know, the beds within a unit. You could have, now, it may not really work that way in the real world, but the system allows for a lot of different configurations. If Unit 1 had 5 beds and, you know, 2 of them were adults only and 2 of them were children only, it really doesn't work out that way, but the system does allow that to occur. Now, as we said before, everything needs to add up to the initial baseline things that were entered. So because it's looking for beds, every bed number that you enter in, of course, must equal the total of 20 before you can continue on. Now, along with the CH, basically, the chronically homeless, instead of attaching it to a single unit, basically, if you have any beds that are CH denoted, you'll have the field here underneath to basically denote that for that unit. And that's basically it. Once you hit save on either, you know, you don't have to go through both. It's either a manual or system. You hit save, and basically that finishes the process for units. Now, vouchers, probably say this a lot too, they're kind of hybrids. It's kind of like a part bed, part unit. And it has a very similar setup to units, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on this since the setup's kind of the same, but it is a little bit different. With vouchers, you basically enter in your total number of vouchers, and then we also require to enter in the total number of beds to those vouchers. Now, we know vouchers are kind of virtual, and it could be hard to tell, you know, hey, I've got a voucher. I don't know if it's going to be 1 person or 5 people in it. Unfortunately, because of the data standards, we are still required to collect this information. So we kind of going to train on that, you know, we're basically looking for an estimated number of beds that you think are going to be provided for each voucher. So that's what you're putting in there. Then basically once you hit next, the next step is basically pretty similar. It's basically looking for the number of vouchers per unit, actually number of beds per voucher distribution. This wording's a little bit off. We've actually fixed that in the latest release. And it has basically the same thing, system or manual. And it basically allows you the 2 different processes. With system, the system will automatically evenly distribute the number of estimated beds per voucher, and what it's looking for here is vouchers. So basically, just like the units, you're going to put the number of vouchers and all associated estimated beds with that voucher and a household type. Of course, it needs to add up to the total number of vouchers you have. Then with the manual method, just like with units, it'll show each individual voucher. And what it's looking for here is instead of configuring each bed individually, because with vouchers, even though we're collecting this information, you're going to put everybody into a voucher. The beds are more virtual, tracked virtually, and basically they're there for reporting purposes, for the HIC and the data standards. So you basically individually disperse the bed counts, and basically you pick from a drop-down of what household type that voucher is going to be designated. And of course, all the beds, since they're just a virtual estimated count, get associated. And if the voucher's a CH, you can basically check that box there. And as with the whole system, basically, total number of beds need to match the total number estimated up at the top of the screen. Okay, whenever you finish any one of the, configuration trees or trails, however you want to say it, down at the bottom, only when you hit the final save and the system goes, okay, everything's validated, that's good, it'll actually uncover what we call the confirmation screen button. That will basically, when you hit that button, it'll take you to the second step, which is what we call our edit configuration screen. It's the second tool that we've developed where you actually put in things like dates and everything, and it really gets a little bit more in depth with all this inventory. You can do that. Now, if you're doing multiple types, you probably want to wait until, units and beds or beds and vouchers are done, because when you hit the confirmation button, if you have partially entered information, like say you've only done beds down, it hasn't been completed, you will lose that information. It only carries over completely configured data. One note here that we want to make about some data conversion that we did. Now, any inventory, from the previous system, for any residential program that never entered in inventory in our old way, is basically going to be starting out as no inventory. It's going to be placed right on that full entry screen. Same thing if, whenever you add a new residential program, add a new site, that sort of thing. However, we didn't want to penalize those organizations or programs that did their due diligence and entered in the inventory in the old way. So what we've actually done is we've tried to convert that old data to the new system standards. So any inventory record that had information previously entered in, what you'll see is basically it'll have an unconfigured status, which basically means I have data there, but it's not ready to be used. Now, the reason we did this, maybe your old data has all the data elements and it's ready to go. We still, since it's the new way to do it, we didn't want to automatically put it in play. So we still require you to take a look at it and do a save process or an update process before we allow that inventory to be used. Now, one note here is, since the old data standards kind of collected things in a not very detailed fashion, you weren't able to basically enter information as units and everything like that. We had to convert all the old inventory to beds. So if you're like a permanent supportive housing or transitional that have units, please make sure that you know that you have all the, everything will be beds, and we're actually going to give you a tool called Group as Units that you're able to actually transfer those out to units if you need to, or if you want to start from scratch, you can delete it all and go on your way. We just didn't want you to lose any of that data. All right, now we're going to come to the edit confirmation screen. It's basically used for two primary functions. A, to complete the configuration of newly added inventory. Anytime you do use the new full entry screen, you will have to go through a second step, basically through this edit configuration screen. The other use for it is, this is kind of the maintenance area, so for any existing items you have, this is where you want to go to basically, look at the configuration of it, make little maintenance changes. It also allows you to add inventory, but it's just a one at a time thing. So that's why, if you want to add 10 beds one at a time through the screen, you can feel free to do that. However, the full entry screen will be available for those mass entries. The screen is separated into the 4 main inventory types. Each one, there's 2 for the beds, facility, non-facility, as well as units and vouchers. And since each one of them have a little bit of configuration type, of course, each one has a little bit different data elements and different look and feel on the screens. And we'll kind of cover each of those in order. Just kind of want to give you kind of a main look at what it looks like. Kind of provides, the program site type that you're with. And as you can see here, there's the different tabs. You click on it, takes it to you. And as you can see here, every single bed, also units and vouchers are this way, are all individually lined here with basically the name, the status, availabilities, household types, all the dates. It's very, very detail-oriented down to configuring each individual item that you have within the system. Provides a lot of flexibility, and don't worry, you can configure them individually, and we also have a decent amount of tools, what we call a batch edit that we'll talk about, that if you have a lot of the same configuration, you don't have to go and enter a date for each one. We'll basically be able to batch edit a whole bunch of items in the system. And also, if you have inventory that you select on the site profile screen, if you have the status of unconfigured, which means data was converted and brought over, this is actually the screen that you are going to start on. We're going to kind of start with beds, kind of go over the information available for that. Now, a lot of the stuff that we talk about here, with the data elements that are required, some basic utilities that are available on the screen, are kind of going to go over the whole tool itself. And I'll mention saying, hey, this is going to be the same no matter what unit you're dealing with or what type you're dealing with, so we don't have to be redundant with all these features. All beds in the system require these following data elements: availability, household type, HMIS participating flag, as well as start dates, which are both inventory start date and HMIS dates if your inventory is what we call HMIS participating. And basically, for all inventory, all of these are required. Now, the first full entry screen basically provides you with the number as well as the availability and the household type. Once you create new beds, basically what you'll have to do is come in and tell whether it's HMI is participating, and basically the second stage of the configuration is basically entering in the dates for that inventory. Now, of course, you can change any of this information around after the fact, but those are the basic 2 steps for it. Now, with the dates, we just want to kind of go over some general date rules for when you are doing the second step of configuration. And this is for either new beds, new items or existing items. All inventory items require the entry of an inventory start date prior for it to be configured. It will stay in an unconfigured state until it has an actual start date. If it is HMIS participating, the inventory must also include accompanying HMIS dates. So if you're doing a new inventory, it's got a start date. It also has to have a HMIS start date. Conversely, if you close it out and end it, it's got to have a corresponding HMIS end date. No HMIS participating start dates can be prior to the inventory start date. Because basically HMIS participating, to get into that a little bit, that basically means that you are taking a concerted effort to collect the basic universal data elements for the clients that are going to reside in that bed. That's basically the distinction of whether it's HMIS participating or not. And the start date of the HMIS participating, while the inventory start date's when it actually became available for clients to use. HMIS participating basically means when it was available, that's when you started collecting the universal data elements. Now, you can, since this is kind of a new interface, you can put dates way in the past. If you started your inventory back in 2006, that's the start date that you can put in. We want you to actually go back to, truthfully and honestly track how long you've had your inventory there. Of course, the start date can't be before the inventory start date. No inventory can have an end date that is in the future. And basically we'll get into some of the maintenance options. And an end date's basically when a bed is retired or a unit gets retired and was used but is no longer going to be used. We don't allow them to be closed out in the future. You can't set like estimated close dates. It needs to be done in real time. The only exception, there's always exceptions to rule, are those seasonal beds that we talked about earlier that basically are predefined time frames, and they always require an end date. And we have a section during the maintenance section, since seasonal beds are kind of a strange bunch, have some special rules to it. We'll talk about those during that section. Once a specific bed has been configured, basically has all availability as well as start dates and accompanying HMIS dates, and you hit the Save button up at the top, which will show you the configuration tools available for each section. The system will turn the status from unconfigured. Basically, if you see here, it started unconfigured, it means it's not ready, to vacant. That's basically our default configured status. A vacant bed basically means, hey, I'm ready to allow people to check in. And when we talked about the active, as long as you have at least one vacant bed in your inventory, that's when it will flip the status to vacant or active and it be allowed to be used with your program interface. One other note here is these inventory items, they all have open fields, and kind of talked about in the supplemental training. Basically, we kind of give them default names, whatever it is, bed this, voucher that, unit this, and we basically use the ID. Feel free, you can change these. It doesn't support a huge naming convention. I think we give you about 12 characters to fill in for those bed and unit names, but feel free to do that. Of course, anything that you do change within the thing, it's not a real-time interface, so if you flip a status or change a date, you do need to save it on that page prior to for it to actually permanently saving in the system, because if you leave the screen before you save it, you will lose that information. Now, at the top of each section is a bunch of what we call configuration tools. We basically have an add, a batch edit, a remove, and a save. We also have a group as unit, but that's only a bed-based thing. Now, those four main ones, add through save, they're pretty consistent through all of the inventory types and pretty much do the same thing. So we're going to kind of go through and explain quickly what each of them do, and pretty much you can know what they're going to do at each screen in the system. The first one we're going to talk about is the batch edit. That's kind of the neatest feature that we wanted to implement, because we know some of these inventories can get, could be rather large. You could have 30, 50 beds, and basically to go through and put in the same date for every single bed could get a little maybe frustrating, overwhelming. So that's why we provided this hopefully easy-to-use batch utility that basically can be done in 3 steps. What we also added is a little information line here, a little batch editor line, so in case this information is lost, hopefully it'll lead you to the right information. The first thing that you do is basically that you want to include in the edit process is these check boxes here. And these check boxes basically is a way to select the bed. Now, if you're individually just entering information, you don't need to select them. You can just do it on the screen. But if you're doing some of these options, such as remove or batch edit, you basically can select the specific beds. Say you just, and we also have this default all bed here. Basically, when you check this box, it'll basically check every single bed in this screen. And it even includes, say you have 3 pages of beds, basically it'll check not just the screen you're on, but every single bed within the screen. You basically check that box. The second step is we have all these basic configuration that corresponds to every single field, HMIS, the different dates, CH, that's the screen you're on. You can share the configuration with every single item. So kind of in this example, you see all these beds are unconfigured, and you can kind of look at them, okay, everything's good, but every single bed I had started on the same date, has the same HMIS start date. You don't want to go through each of them individually and type in the dates. You can if you want, but you don't have to. So what you do is you come up here, you type the date you want to share, the HMIS date you want to share. You also could pick household type. Say you wanted to change all these to adults only. You basically select that depending on what you fill in. Then you come up here and just hit the batch edit screen tool. What the batch edit does is it looks at all these fields and finds a value for each of the fields, and it looks and goes, hey, which one of these are checked? It could be 1, could be 5, could be 10, could be all of them, and it'll automatically write that data value to that specific field. So we think this is a pretty nifty little utility that we put in the system that probably will really help, especially with those large inventories that share a lot of the same data between multiple items. And this is available on everyone. This isn't just beds. You can do this with vouchers, and how we'll show you can do this with multiple units and unit beds as well. Quick overview of some of the other features in the system. The Add button, as we said, the Edit Confirmation screen does allow for individual items to be added. Basically, when you click the Add button, it basically will just create a blank new record at the bottom of whatever page you're on. You can do that for beds, units, vouchers. Now, you will have to configure the information. You set the availability, household type, and dates. It allows you to do that one at a time. The Save button that we kind of talked about, any change you make, even when you do the batch edit, the data is just written to the screen. It's not actually saved. So make sure that any change you do, update to the data, you hit save before you leave the page. There's a remove option, and this actually works in combination with those check boxes that we showed here. Basically, any item that you check, when you hit the remove button, the system will automatically basically delete them from your inventory. Now, just a note here, and we'll talk about this a little bit more about the retiring of beds and the closing out of beds in the maintenance section. You'll only want to use this option if you've mistakenly created a bed or an item or a unit or a voucher. You do not want to use this option if you're had a bed that was in use and you want to close it out because it's no longer used anymore. We want to keep that information historically, both the physical setup and the usage, so be careful with that. And we do have validation in the system, so you can't accidentally remove a bad bed or a bed that was used. If you try to, it'll come up and say, hey, this bed's either currently in use or it's had historical uses. So if you see that message, you'll know what that is. The group is unit. This is actually one that's particular specifically just to inventory, just to beds. And as we said before, since we had to convert all data over to beds, this is kind of where it was designed for usage. Now you can use it in other areas. It also uses those checked features. And basically what it does is, say you have inventory that converted and you want to put them in the units. You can basically check individual beds and say, I want 1, 2, 3. These 4 I know I want in a unit. You click Group as Unit. It'll automatically transfer it to the unit screen and throw them in the same unit. Or you can, just create beds here and, click, 1 bed, 2 beds, 5 beds. It'll remove them from this section and automatically throw it into a unit to allow for configuration in that method. Kind of a neat little feature that we added on late in the design cycle. Okay, now we're going to go on to units. These are, as we said before, simply containers for beds within the system. Basically a way to contain, and usually it should be used for kind of small areas. I mean, you can use units to, if you want to put, 20 beds that you have in a room in a unit, you can. There's nobody stopping you from doing that, but it's more developed for apartment type situations. Now, every bed that you create or associate in a unit, that's what actually holds all the independent data elements. Units basically don't have any start dates, end dates, or anything like that. But each individual bed in a unit basically needs to be configured exactly as we talked about. They all need availability, household type, start dates, everything like that. Now, the unit screens, since they are we wanted to show both elements, both the units that you have and the beds, we had to come up with 2 different views. And we provided like a selection toggle view for this. You basically have a units view, and then you also have a beds view. And we'll show you in the next screen. It's kind of a one of those pictures worth 1,000 words kind of a thing. When you originally go into the units, you basically have all your units that are defined in the system. And of course, as we said before, all inventory items are defaultly named with the type and the ID number. Please change them to whatever unique name you want. Not only do we have that there, we definitely recommend it. Makes it a lot easier during the check-in processes that you know what you're looking at. The entire unit also has a status, and while the unit doesn't have any configuration information, it's one of those things where it always takes the status of its individual beds. So if all the beds are vacant, the unit will be vacant. If all the beds are unconfigured, the unit will be configured. So it's kind of like a master status for the beds in there. And then it also kind of provides just a little information field where it shows, hey, you know, these are the number of beds that are actually associated to this unit. Has the same features, add, remove, and save. Anything you do here, you got to hit save. When you do hit add, it will add it'll add a unit shell basically. It'll just be an empty container that has no beds. Then you'll have to go into the unit, which we'll show you in the next step, and add the individual beds. Removed, same thing. Basically, you check the boxes here, whatever one you remove. Now, when you're removing a unit, not only does it remove the container, it removes any bed within that container. The other option that we have here is kind of like we said, the toggle, is we have a show beds toggle. And it basically toggles between these two views. And basically, any unit that you select and hit the show beds, basically in the next screen we're going to show you, it basically provides the new view with the unit plus all the beds. So it's kind of flexible. So, you know, if you want to just look at one unit at a time, you can check I just want to look at 173, hit show beds, and it'll just show you the two beds in there. But we also allow the viewing of multiple units. So if you check this main box up here, it'll check all of them. When you hit show beds, you're going to see every unit, all 4 unit subsections with every single bed in it. Now here in the next screen basically shows what this kind of bed toggle screen looks like. And as you can see here, it's got all the main features. Basically, it's the same information that we have for the beds. Each bed, as you're going to see here, is, you know, these 2 beds are assigned to this unit. These 2 beds are assigned to that unit, and that's kind of how it's broken down in the system to help you keep things separated. We kind of color-coded it to make it a little visually appealing so you know what beds are with what unit. The status is availability. Like I said before, when a unit is created and the bed's in it, in the full entry screen, basically this is the second step. You need to make sure that, you know, the dates are entered before they become available, and it provides the same features. You can go in here and enter the information manually, or you can also use the batch edit field, which we definitely recommend for those that have the same information. Now, you don't have to just batch edit beds within the same unit. You know, that's why we allow you to select multiple units. So we have 2 units here. Now, if all 4 beds in both units have the same information, go ahead and check them all, use the batch edit feature, and go ahead and write the same information. I mean, you could have 8 units, you know, 32 beds, 4 in each unit. If they all have the same start dates and end dates and household types, you know, there's no sense in doing them one at a time. You know, select them all, toggle to the screen, use the batch feature on every single bed in every single unit. So it's a nice little feature here. One little note, kind of the add, you know, the remove and save use exactly the same, you know, features. You got to check each individual item to remove it. Make sure you save before you leave the screen. The add feature is a little bit different than any other screen because when you add it, basically you're creating a bed, but since you could have multiple units here, the system kind of has to ask you, well, where's this bed associated to? So the first thing that you need to do is associate which unit that bed is. And depending on which units you have here, so in this example you have 2 units, when you create a bed here, it'll basically ask you to drop down, hey, is this for unit 173? Or is this for unit 174? And that's the first step you need to do. If you don't pick a unit and leave the screen, the bed won't be created because we have to know which unit it is associated to. And also, once you're done here, you got the toggle. Basically, you go back and forth. Once you click Show Units, you'll basically go back to this previous screen, and you can, you know, go into other units or do whatever you need to do to complete the process. The vouchers, pretty much like beds, not going to go spend a lot of time on it. Basically the same information, same exact utilities here. Each voucher will be individually listed. Like I said before, the vouchers are their own container that have, beds associated to it. The only difference here is each voucher has their own estimated bed count. You don't configure each bed individually because we don't know if it's going to be one person or 5 people in it. So, of course, with the batch edit, we also have the bed count up there. So if all your vouchers have the same bed count, you can overwrite that feature as well. Basically all the same features with the batch edit, remove, and everything there as well. Now, with the vouchers, when you create a new one, the minimum, there's basically only a minimum. Each voucher needs to have a minimum bed count of at least 1 before it can be saved and configured. Now, before we kind of go on to some maintenance features, and we're going to take a break probably after about 5 or 6 more slides, show you some the next review screen and everything like that. We do have, since inventory can be could be overwhelming, you have a lot of information and everything, we've got some filtering features within the system that'll help you kind of locate inventory you're looking for. Within this bottom row here, like up here, here's the batch edit stuff. Here's basically filters that basically allows you to kind of slice and dice your information on each screen. It's almost kind of like a search feature where you have the status that basically provides all the statuses here, availability, household type, as well as whether it's an HMIS, these are basically true or false, as well as chronically homeless. You can also denote all inventory as chronically homeless by checking this box. By picking these filters, it basically, you can, say I just want all my unconfigured year-round adults-only beds that are HMIS participating. You can select that in the filter, and immediately as soon as you select it, the system will automatically rebuild this grid and only show you the items that you're filtering for. So it's a pretty neat little feature here. You can go, hey, what are my vacant? What are my occupied? What are my closed out inventory? So it's kind of a nice little feature there to help with maintaining your inventory. The other feature we have here is what we call kind of like a page size, pagination. Because of the size of the inventory, we can only, by default, we fit 10 inventory items on the original grid. Now, if you want to view, instead of going from page to page to page, we actually allow you to, on the fly, change your page size. And it basically has 5 selections that you can go in multiples of 10, 20, 30, all the way up to 50 items per page. So if you want to take a big, big idea, big scope look at all your inventory items, feel free to do that. But once you leave the page and come back, it always defaults to 10. One note about that, the reason we did default it to 10 is this screen and utility is kind of a, I guess what we call a resource hog. It takes a lot of processing power because of all the, a lot of data it's loading and everything like that. So while you can expand it and go ahead and do that, the processes could be a little bit slower because the system's got to rethink and basically relook at every single item. If you got 50 items on the screen rather than 10, it might take a little bit longer to get the job done. Just wanted to mention that. It's not something to stop you from doing it, but just want to make sure everybody's aware of it. Okay, once everything is done, once you're happy with the information that you've configured, within the edit configuration screen, which is the second step of the entry process. And like I said before, it's also going to be used primarily for maintenance. Down at the bottom of each individual screen, each of the 4 sections, is basically a review screen button that basically you can go to at any time. And hopefully a lot of you guys were in the supplemental training that showed all the neat informational features within there. When you're done here, basically you hit the review screen and basically it'll take you to that review screen and basically show you all the inventory items that are currently configured and available for use in the system. I kind of recommend doing that, so if you know, hey, I've got 20 beds and 20 vouchers, go to the review screen real quick. Make sure you got the 20 beds and the 20 vouchers on the review screen if they're available, because if you go, oh, none of my vouchers showed up, you know that you got to go back to the edit screen to figure out, you know, what's missing there. As we show, basically it's broken up into the 4 different sections. Basically shows only the available inventory items that you've configured. If it's still unconfigured, it won't show up on the screen. Each inventory item is a basic button. Now, only for agency managers, you know, they only have access to these screens. Basically, every review screen basically has the 2 links here. We got 2 of them. It's called Add New Inventory Items and Edit Existing Inventory Items. Now, by clicking those, it'll take you back to the 2 special tools. Now, the Add New basically takes you directly to the full entry screen. Like we said before, it'll probably mostly be used just during the, you know, the initial entry process. But if your inventory drastically changes, you're adding new inventory items, that's definitely the tool you want to use. As well as the Edit Existing Inventory, that takes you back to the Edit Confirmation screen. And for maintenance purposes and update, you're probably going to be using the Edit Confirmation screen definitely a lot more than the full entry. It's pretty much going to be used a lot when you manage your inventory. And a couple other features within the review screen. Basically, when you click on each individual bed, it'll show you the individual configuration information, provides, you know, what availability, when it started, provides pretty good information. One feature we do want to show here, and this is only for agency managers, is it has an edit bed feature. And this is kind of a nice little feature to kind of edit information on a kind of a one-on-one basis. If you kind of click on a bed and go, oh, well, that date's not right, or that should be a different household type, you can click on this edit bed, and it'll automatically take you to the edit confirmation screen, but instead of having all your inventory, it's only going to have a row with that one bed you selected. So if it's 3663, that's the only bed you're going to see on the screen to allow kind of almost a unique little edit session just with that bed. Once you're, you know, update the information, as soon as you hit save, the system will actually is smart enough to return you right back to where you are. So it's a nice little process that if you're checking something and you notice something, you don't have to go all the way out. This is a nice little back and forth option.